Hey, paisans, the time has come. On the air since 2009, the independently produced, non-FCC compliant champ of video game talk podcasting. Here comes Tiger Claw Radio. Here's your host, Critical Failure.
Happy New Year, everybody. You're listening to Tiger Claw Radio. It's me, your old pal CF. I got my tea and hanging out. Thanks for letting me come out a day late and a buck short yet again. But I have a really great show for you this week. I've got a true blue Vancast and a really good one, if I do say so myself. Also, just trolling around for chiptunes. This compilation that I picked up, it's not a new thing, but this was an acclaimed release that people spoke very highly of. It's Ibuki Tunes Equilibrium. It's a free chiptune zip pack that you can get off of Bandcamp. We're going to play a couple tracks off it and see what we can see. Alright, so let's go ahead and get things going. Here's chiptune. That's Rush Jet 1. That's the sixth track off the Equilibrium compilation. What's the name of the song? Calming Winds. Rush Jet 1 is an old name, brother. That's a name that I remember seeing back on, I want to say the 8-Bit Collective, but I'm sure they were there as well. But 8-Bit Peoples, that's where I know Rush Jet 1 from. The original chiptune label, like my first introduction to chiptunes. First time I really figured out chiptunes was a thing was wandering on to 8-Bit Peoples, and getting the Anime Gucci album, the free EP from like 10 years ago. And that I've told this story before, but that kicked open the door, and I realized, oh hey, all these albums are free, and this is like Nintendo kind of music. And one of the bands that was there that I checked out, which I believe is just one guy, but I don't know. Is Rush Jet 1. So, chiptune artists have been around forever and a day. Couple of really big names on this compilation. I see Fear of Dark on here. And that's really it. Alright, let's see what we got. Right, a Vancast. I've got a true blue Vancast. So, for the first time in a while, we're going on location. Stick with us. Morning, everybody. It's the Vancast, a true blue Vancast, heading into work for the first time since the beginning of March, and it's the end of December now, so it's been a bit. Got just a quick stop to make, got to go in for a couple hours, and no big deal. It feels good though, man. It feels cold. Wasn't this cold the last time I had to do this? It is 9:14 a.m., which is way later than I'm used to driving to work. I usually like to get up early so that I can jam out some video games. Have some time in the studio before I actually have to go in and handle business. But not today, 9:14 a.m. And it is, what do we got? My dashboard says 37 degrees. I don't know how accurate that thing is. Particularly in the summertime, it would be like, oh, it's only, 80 degrees. And meanwhile, it's like 110 outside or something crazy like that. So heading on down the road, I took a look to see what was going on. I don't usually go into, I think it's kind of a misnomer when you talk about retro video game news, because all the games are 20 plus years old. So how much news can happen in that scene? Occasionally things do happen, but I never really hung my hat on that as like a segment. But I looked it up this morning just to see what was going on. Every once in a while I do that. And a couple of things. There was an old peripheral for the Game Boy that was dug up by some historian, and it's unreleased. So we're talking about a prototype that was never available on the market. And what was it called? It was called the Work Boy. So here's the deal. Back in the 90s, before everyone had a cell phone, they were toying, when I say they, I mean everybody in the electronics market, was toying with PDAs, personal assistants, little electronic gizmos that you could put in phone numbers and appointments, and that sort of thing. PDAs were a thing for a little while. I remember my older brother had one that could do some fancy stuff, and I got a hold of one long after the fact, once cell phones were already a thing. I got a hold of one that had an SD card port in it, and it couldn't connect to Wi-Fi, but I could sideload a ton of stuff on it via the SD card. It couldn't even the processor couldn't run a video file, but it could read a text file, and there were a few simple games that were programmed specifically for that operating system. So I was able to run. I remember distinctly playing Rogue on it. Rogue was remade for this old PDA, and I read a few public domain novels in TXT format via the Gutenberg project. You can go get some, you know how if you go to text files, find an old text files archive, you can get 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea completely written out in a text document. I got a hold of a few of those. I remember reading Peter Pan that way. But anyway, that's PDAs. And longer ago, when they were actually still a thing, I remember getting a hold of a Tiger Electronic PDA, which was much less feature intensive, we'll say. It had a display similar to a calculator, and I could store phone numbers in it and a couple of simple notes. And that was really about it. But that was really all I needed. Anyway, so that was what PDAs used to be like. And of course, when cell phones came out, all of that just kind of went in the dumpster all at once, very, very quickly. So this Workboy add-on was essentially a full keyboard that connected to a Game Boy, and it was packaged with some sort of Game Boy game, which the idea was to turn the Game Boy into a fully functioning, PDA. I read about this a little bit this morning. I did the normal internet routine of just glancing it over and not fully checking it out, because I saw the keyboard, I saw a still shot of the Game Boy with a few, PDA type icons on it, and I was like, okay, I get the gist of it. Somebody dug up a PDA, attachment for the original Game Boy. And when I say Game Boy, I'm talking about the DMG gray cart, the brick Game Boy. This is pre-Game Boy Pocket, pre-Game Boy Color, old school Game Boy type Game Boy. I think it would be really cool to get a hold of a keyboard like that now, because the chiptunes folks have breathed a lot of life into the old Game Boy and kept it running for a lot longer. Hang on a second. I distinctly remember, and this has been a lot of years, but I know you can still find it if you look. When I was younger, and I was first into emulation, like the first couple of years I was into emulators, I got a hold of a Game Boy emulator, and I got the first 3 Zork games on the Game Boy. So the Zork games, referring to like the text adventures from Infocom, Zork 1, 2, 3. Okay? So think about this. This is a text adventure with a parser where you'd have to type in your actions and it would have to interpret them. This was being played on a Game Boy. Even though it was just an emulator running a ROM, that's the way it was designed. It was a Game Boy ROM that played Zork. So you had to use the arrow keys on A and B to cycle through the letters one at a time and type your words into the parser. That, and it also had, like a copy-paste interface. So if one of the words you needed for your parser command happened to be on the screen at that time, then you could move the cursor up, grab that word, and dump it in the command line. Very cumbersome to say the least. I never tried to play through any of those games like that, but I did open them up and like look around in the game a little bit. Particularly the first Zork game. Like, I got into the house. If you've ever played the original Zork, you start out next to a house and you got to get in the house, and then there's a dungeon under the house. That's the game. I got as far as like getting into the dungeon, and that was about it. That was all I could take of the Zork trilogy on the original Game Boy. Now, with this keyboard, I could see it being a really neato thing. But then you have this whole concept of just because there's a keyboard attachment, it doesn't mean that games like Zork or whatever are programmed to be compatible with it, and blah, blah, blah. Peripherals for devices now, they have there's an accepted standard of compatibility that things just didn't have back in those days. You could have a computer with a serial port, and you could have a gamepad with a serial port, and that gamepad could just not work with that computer, just because maybe the processor wasn't up to snuff, maybe you didn't have the right operating system, or I don't know. The compatibility, I mean, those elements still exist today, but it was much more likely that you would run into those compatibility issues back then. They were much more frequent, and it wasn't as accepted that this plug fits in this hole, therefore this device will work on this machine. Now people kind of expect that, even though it's not always the case. Like, we were shopping for a mouse, a computer mouse for my kids. They use Chromebooks, for school and whatnot. And I went to get a wireless mouse, and my wife asked the question, "Are you sure those are compatible with Chromebook?" And I stopped for a second, and I was like, "Wait a second, these are wireless. It's a wireless mouse with a little USB dongle. Why would it not be compatible with Chromebook?" And then it occurred to me that I was just kind of taking for granted, and they probably are, but I should check that out, because it was just wireless mouse, with a USB dongle and something that has a USB port. Just, being someone who never messed with Mac, it just seemed like a given that would work. It didn't even occur to me that there would be a compatibility issue. But that's not the way it was back in those days, man. Back in the days of the Game Boy. Old school Game Boy came out a long time ago, man. Think about this. I don't have dates in front of me, but I remember reading that it came out in 1989. like when it first hit the market. I don't know if that's accurate or not, because I read that in a book that had a lot of inaccuracies. But even let's say 1990, all right? People were still using MS-DOS in those days. Everybody didn't have the internet then, you know what I mean? Windows, right? If you had Windows in 1990, then it was probably Windows 3.1 if you're lucky. So yeah, you want to talk about compatibility issues. Oh my gosh. Computing was a different world, man. And I realize I'm going down like the same old rabbit hole of, hey, I'm old. Remember when I wasn't old? Things sure were different then. But hey, man, it's true. What are you going to do? Speaking of the Game Boy, the only other news story I saw was one of these games that's like a new game being released for an old console, and it was also on the Game Boy. This one I remember much less of, but I believe it was called Jetpack Dx or Super Jetpack Dx, and it looked okay. You know, when I first heard Jetpack, I was like, let's see if that's tied into the DOS game Jetpack that Hemrock has been making levels for, because that would be like insta-buy. Old school Jetpack on the Game Boy. It wouldn't be good. No. Because there are a couple examples of DOS games that made it to the Game Boy, and they were all awful, for the most part. You remember Commander Keen on the Game Boy Color? No, sir. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think Duke Nukem made it too, didn't it? Like a side-scrolling Duke Nukem? I might be wrong about that. I don't know. But Commander Keen and the Zork games were DOS games that made it to Game Boy, and they were all atrocious. MS-DOS people, let me know if I'm forgetting anything. I know Heroes of Might and Magic made it to Game Boy Color, and that was also pretty bad, but I really enjoyed that just in terms of a technological feat, that they were able to shrink it down. And, you know, Heroes of Might and Magic is pretty expansive. Even a gimped up version, being able to explore and fight monsters and stuff like that, being able to accomplish a game like that on the Game Boy, even though that was like Game Boy Color, was fascinating. So that was a lot of fun to play. I don't know if I still have it, but I actually bought that at one point. Didn't play it much. I put it in, I was like, oh man, this is cool. Heroes of Might and Magic on the Game Boy, and then into the box it goes. So there's this new game, Jetpack, Super Jetpack DX, showed up on my quick search, which is pretty cool. I actually took a look at it, and they're taking pre-orders in euros, and it's 20 euros for a cart only with no box, and that equated to like $33 in US dollars, thereabouts. And then on top of that, I'd have to pay shipping from, you know, wherever they're manufacturing these from, which is probably not going to be cheap if they're pricing it in euros. So if I had to estimate, we're looking at $40 for a Game Boy game. And it's a little high, I gotta say. But these independent games, these old school system releases, you know, independent releases for old school systems, they're always a pretty penny. That's just the way it is. Pretty penny for a game that you can't get anywhere else. So, I don't know. It wouldn't be the first time I've paid $40 for a Game Boy card. The only other time I did it was, I'm pretty sure the only time I ever bought a flash card. It was before I think I had ever heard of EverDrive. I got that Game Boy flash card back in the, 8-bit collective days. So we're talking about 2011, maybe 2010, something like that. Maybe even earlier. I don't know. Old Game Boy card, Game Boy flash card. It uses a USB cable, a micro USB cable type that I don't see anywhere anymore. If you have a PS3 hanging around, you know the kind of cable that connects PS3 controllers when you want to charge them? It's that type. I don't know what it's called though. It's like Probably not micro USB. It's probably like mini USB or something like that. I know those terms are all static terms for standards that like you could identify. Like micro USB is actually a specific shape as opposed to just a small cable. So yeah. Hang on a second here. Give me 1 second. All right. So I don't know, man. $40 for a Game Boy game. To be perfectly honest, I'm probably not going to do it. But kudos to them for making it. I hope they're successful. And they do offer a ROM. Like, you can get a ROM for $10 if you just want to like play it on an emulator or something. Or if I just wanted to load it on my flash card, I guess I could do that. But if I had real interest, I'd probably want to go diesel. I probably want to get a cart, because not just like to support the developers or something, although that is a thing. I definitely would want to support a release like this, just because I know these kinds of runs are really small. So if you want a game like this, you got to get in on the ground floor or it disappears. You know what I mean? You might find this cart for $100 on eBay or something like that in a year or two or whatever, but it's not going to show up in any sort of attainable format apart from that. Man, I'm looking right at the sun. I'm stopped at a red light right now, and my eyes are headed right at the sun. Ugh. I like to drive to work when it's dark. That's what I like. I want pitch black outside, where I can be alone with my thoughts, taking the back roads, doing what I gotta do. Speaking of which, with that story, I'm probably going to send you guys back to the studio just for safety reasons, just because I got to focus on my driving. But yeah, big Game Boy type morning for me this morning. So I still have that shoebox of old Game Boy stuff that I dig out every once in a while. I think the last time I dug it out was when I was in that big time pachinko kick. I might dig that out again and dig up Heroes of Might and Magic on the Game Boy just to give that a try one more time. Even though I know full well it's going to be like a 5-minute run where I'm like, oh, that's awful to control. Whoever uses the select button. All right, I'll see you back in the studio. We're going to be heading back to the Equilibrium compilation for another chiptune, but first I want to tip my hat to the Patreon sponsors who keep this show coming back every single week no matter what. And I read their names off in a hall of distinguished gentlemen. They are, indeed, Hemrock, EmeraldRangers.com, Tecmo Balls, Darabka, Konstantin Kelman, and Eric Kentroller. Thank you guys so much. I hope you're having a good time. Here's Fear of Dark on Tiger Claw Radio. It's the fail bag here on TCR. It's time to listen. Time to read some comments and letters from individuals who I'm good friends with. If you want to interact with the show, it's an open invitation. We don't have to know each other. However, most of these people are good friends since it's such a small show. But the door's always open. Just leave a comment on YouTube. If you know me personally, shoot me an email. Just make sure it's clear what I'm allowed to read on the air, so that there's no oopsie daisies. This one's from Hemrock. He says, Hey, CF, I hope you and your family had a Merry Christmas. Thank you for doing some great TCR action. I really appreciate that you releasing a True Blue episode for Christmas week. It was a genius idea to talk about a retro gaming article such as that MS-DOS one from Den of Geek, but more on that later. I also want to say the chiptunes are really kicking on the last TCR. Amazing choices. Thank you. What was the third song you played in the last episode? I don't remember, dude. I'll have to go back and look it up and see if I can figure it out. I can't remember if you've played this one recently, but Ballad of Battle by Funote from Master System Battle of the Bits is pretty good. I think I may have played it, but I think it was a few weeks ago. I think next week we can dig that one up for sure. Do you ever plan on releasing another chiptune compilation like you've done in the past? Absolutely. I think we're way overdue. What do you think, man? It was great to see Darabka make a recent appearance. Yeah, it was awesome. I had a good time. How's Tabletop Simulator treating you? You mentioned playing Boss Monster. Someone actually gave me that as a gift years ago. I still have it sealed. Maybe I can bring it to Tigerfest if you're interested in playing IRL. All right, let's talk a little bit about a couple of things, Tabletop Simulator and Boss Monster. First off, you should consider getting a copy of Tabletop Simulator, man. I'm looking forward to hooking up so we can play some Cockatrice and Magic the Gathering. But Tabletop Simulator, for me personally, has been a blast. I'm having a great time with it. And I think you might enjoy it as well. I know you're not much of a D&D guy, but there's a lot of fun traditional type board games that I've been enjoying on the Tabletop Simulator. My current favorite is a game called Tiny Epic Galaxies. But yeah, Boss Monster, that's the next line. Okay, yeah, okay. You mentioned playing Boss Monster. Someone actually gave it to me as a gift years ago. I have it sealed. Maybe I can bring it to Tigerfest. That's an awesome game, dude. It's an awesome game. I really enjoy it. Simple to play. Simple to learn, which is a big deal because board games, of course, vary in complexity. They can be all over the map in terms of complexity. Boss Monster was a game I was able to read the instructions and figure out how to play without having to have someone teach me. You can learn to play in just a few minutes. The games don't last very long, and it's cool. It's a good game. What is the drive-through RPG card counterpart? Drive-through cards? Yeah, drivethroughcards.com. There's a site called drivethroughcards.com that sells card games and stuff like that are made by small developers. You can develop a print and play card game and sell the PDF for 99 cents on this website. And then you can also develop bigger projects and then have it set up so that people can get print to order versions and order actual cards. Well, there's a few different card games that have licensed this website to have a custom card creator where you can order the actual cards, and Boss Monster is one of them. So if you go to this website, you can build expansion cards for this game and then actually order them, and it's $1 or 50 cents or $1 something to get a custom card sent to your house. So you can build cards and order them, and then of course there's also a huge list of cards other people have built that you can order as well. So I haven't messed with that because I only have that game in digital form, but I enjoy it. Yeah, if you brought that to Tigerfest, I'd be so down, dude. That's a good game. Let's get back to the comment. Did you receive any gaming stuff for Christmas? Did you pick anything up in the Steam/GOG sales? Okay, Steam and GOG sales, not much. I got a lot of DLC for Tabletop Simulator. I can't think if I got any actual games. Oh yeah, I did. I got Cuphead. Finally, my son really wanted to play Cuphead, and he was like, "Hey, Dad, why don't we go halvesies?" I was like, "Okay." So we got Cuphead, and we played it once, and we realized that it was, even though it's a multiplayer game, we decided it was better off for us to play it single player, because he's younger than me, you know? Junior is now 11 years old, so he's hit that age where he's starting to shoot past me. You know what I mean? If you think back to when we were kids, it's that moment where suddenly your parents don't know how to program the VCR and you know all the buttons to press just because that's what you do. He's hitting that age. So he's way smarter than me in a lot of ways. But when we played Cuphead, he was dying pretty quick. So what would happen is he would die, and then he would have to sit and watch as I advanced and then eventually died. And that irritated him, which makes perfect sense, you know? It's a rage game. That's what it does. So we decided, you should play Cuphead by yourself and have fun with it. Because he spent some of his allowance on this game. Not a ton, but when Cuphead goes on sale, it's only like $13. It only goes down to like $13 or something, $14. So that was too expensive. So that's why I hadn't got it all this time. But if you go halvesies on it with somebody who lives in your house, then it's only $7. And we decided that was worth it. I want this guy to get his $7 worth. That's my son. You know what I mean? So that was the most game type thing that I got from the sales. Didn't get anything from GOG. And I don't really have. I just didn't get anything from GOG. I recently drifted back to my GOG collection and played a few GOG games, and that was huge. But I don't use GOG a whole lot. So even though I think they sell quality games, I think the GOG Galaxy client is an embarrassment, and it's really difficult for me to use. So that's just my opinion. I know our good buddy Durabka loves his GOG games. But even then, it's the game. Help me out, Sean. It's the games that are awesome, right? Not the Galaxy client. All right, yeah. But let's read on. You mentioned playing Drug Wars on a calculator back in high school. As someone who went to high school in Texas, I, of course, had a Texas Instrument graphing calculator, specifically a TI-83 Plus. As an aside, I finally sold that thing on eBay about 3 years ago for a ridiculous price of $70. Why are those things still so expensive? It was a strange circumstance because I had sold it right before going on a road trip. It turned out that the person who purchased the calculator lived in a town on my way. So I actually hand delivered that calculator to their mailbox. Weird, but it saved me $4 shipping, so why not? Yeah, good for you, man. In any case, did you ever play Mario for the TI-83? Believe it or not, it's actually one of my favorite portable versions of Mario, as it has a level editor. I remember one kid making those Kaizo insanely difficult Mario levels, and to his credit, he was actually able to beat them himself. Here's a video of what the game looked like. Yeah, I've seen that before, but I've never played it. There were a few really cool TI-83 games going around that I didn't get my hands on personally. The most popular in my circle was Tetris. There was a Tetris clone that was functional for the TI-83 and TI-83 Plus. Looked really cool. I didn't get it. The only games I remember having was Drug Wars and some sort of race game. When I say race, think more like River Raid, but in reverse, where you would plummet down from the top, and the thing would get narrower and narrower, and you had to kind of stay within the lines. And I would do a lot of drawing on the Cartesian coordinate system. But that wasn't a game. That's just like an inbuilt function of the TI-83. Is you could chart things and you could squiggle and I would draw. Speaking of level creators, have you tried out my Jetpack levels by chance? I recently made 3. I can send it to you if you're interested. I'm hoping to complete the 5-level Christmas series in the near future, but of course, the final levels will come out after Christmas. Man, I'm such a bad person because I took the time to dig up a USB floppy drive so that I could get all of the discs you sold that you sent me put onto my desktop, and I did. And the reason I didn't play them was because I wanted to do it in a video, right? And I just haven't yet. I'm so sorry. I'm so glad you made them, and I am genuinely interested because I had such fun with Jetpack. Jetpack was a game I played my father had a lot of CD-ROMs. Okay, this was the very end of the pre-internet era. All right, he bought himself a brand new computer in late 1995 or early 1996. It's about a year before he passed. And this is computers at that point still mega expensive. So he got a computer that had a CD-ROM drive on it, which was, to him, in his mind, it was like the coolest thing in the world. Because this is a guy, you got to understand, my dad was big into floppy disks. Like, you know how you and I are like, floppy disks are kind of cool? That was my dad. Like, if he was still alive, I'm sure he would love to get in on the floppy disk trade. He had his favorite things was not games, though. He liked fonts. His favorite program was WordPerfect. He did a lot of, he enjoyed tinkering around with WordPerfect. WordPerfect, there was a magazine for it that you could get that came with a diskette every single month that had like fonts and stuff on it. And he would have boxes and boxes of fonts and clip art were his two things he really liked. I forgot about clip art. He really liked clip art. Yeah, and like weird like utility magazines. I wish I could have access to his old discs again, but my mother has them. They're like part of she's been a widow for 20 years, so a certain amount of my dad's things are just never going to leave her house, and a lot of his old computing stuff, is among that. When I go over there, she lets me kind of take a look at his stuff, and it's like traveling back in time. It's amazing. He's got a Windows version 1, the OG Windows manual in his basement, in my dad's workshop, which still stands today. Oh, I wish I could ask him about that stuff. Because the stuff that we read about in magazines, that was computing for him. Oh, so awesome. And at that time, when he had that computer, he used to buy boxes of CDs, like how would I describe it? CD packs. 5 or 6 different CDs, clip art and shareware and whatever. And one of the discs in one of these packs was like a Funhouse CD, which essentially was just a bunch of shareware rounded up into a single disc. Single CD. And when I say shareware, I'm talking about mostly DOS games and like early Windows 95 type games. To put it in perspective, one of the games that was actually considered a game was somebody's pinball construction set game. Now, that was put up there right alongside the shareware version of Duke Nukem and stuff. Games like Secret Agent and Commander Keen, this was how I played them, was off of this CD. And one of the games on that CD, which is the reason why I went back to talking about my dad, was because one of the games on that CD was Jetpack. Now, remember that Jetpack originally was a commercial game. It was so this disc had a shareware version. And the way it worked was it had the main storyline, like the main campaign for Jetpack, and it would allow you to create one level. And that was it. And you could save your level, and it wouldn't let you make another one. But I figured out that if you saved your level and you quit the program, and then you went into DOS and renamed that level off of map 00 or whatever the default is, and named it map 001, then when you went to pick out the level, even though it would only let you save one, you in game your previous level was now like the second one, and you could save many that way. It's just every time you created a new level, you had to leave the program, rename your old level, and then go back in it. So in that era, I played a ton of Jetpack. When I was still living at home, but after my dad passed and I got to deep mine into some of his CD collection, that's when Jetpack was uncovered, and I wish I had those levels too. Those are still there on that old computer. If I can ever get access to that again, I would love to dig into my old Jetpack stuff. And those memories make me want to play your Jetpack levels so bad, man. But I want to do it for the first time on OBS. I want to make, another cheese video that has, 10 views or whatever. But they're for me at this point. It's really what they are. So that's my little mega tangent about Jetpack and why it's awesome. And why, even though I haven't got down to playing your Jetpack Christmas levels. I'm so glad that you're making them. Because believe it or not, that silly little game, it takes me back to a good place. It really does. It really does. I used to make ice levels because I thought they were really hard. Jetpack was a game that I was successfully able to use the level maker and build difficult but fair levels. Do you know how like anybody can make a crazy hard Mario level in like a terrible third-party editor that doesn't require validating? I could actually make super difficult levels and then work on playing them for 40 minutes and actually beat them eventually. Jetpack was a great game. Oh my gosh. Let's come back from that mega tangent and read the rest of the email. Huh? Speaking of level create, have you tried the Jetpack layout? That's what I read before. Okay. Like I mentioned before, it was a brilliant idea to turn a Den of Geek article into a segment. I really enjoyed it. Although I do take issue with that particular article. I looked up that website, and that piece was written in May of 2019, even though you mentioned it was published in 2015. Weird. It said that on the page. I don't know. I think it may have been published twice to milk more traffic to the website. Regardless, many games mentioned are not underrated. All right, I'm going to stop you right there. I agree with you. And I poked fun a little bit at the author about that. But I also think those are small gripes, because when it really comes down to it, man, it's just a small article that's written by a small website by another guy like us. It wasn't an IGN article. It wasn't a Kotaku article or anything like that. It was just some gamer's website article. And I'm going to poke fun at him for making those kinds of errors, but at the same time, that didn't make it a bad article, in my opinion. I also don't fault the guy at all for republishing an old article, because you got to respect the hustle. Do you know what I mean? It's the hustle. It's what it is. He's a guy who's on the streets of Brooklyn. He's got a bunch of watches, fake watches under his trench coat, and he's like, "Hey man, $2 looks just like a real Rolex. Hey man, you want a brand new article about video games? It's a brand new article. It's not an article from 3 years ago." Do you know what I mean? It's the hustle. It's a minor hustle. So I respect that, because when I read the article, agree or disagree, you know, that was a guy who was playing the same games, and I could tell he was playing the same games as me. So even though I take issue just like you, the stuff you're mentioning here, like, I'm right there with you. You're right 100%. I don't necessarily think it makes it a bad article either. But let's read on. May have been published twice. Several of the games that I would consider iconic MS-DOS games, such as Tyrian, Scorched Earth, Descent, Raptor Call of the Shadows, and even Commander Keen Goodbye Galaxy. I still remember playing Commander Keen back in 1994. It was essentially the Super Mario Brothers of DOS, whereas Jazz Jackrabbit was the Sonic the Hedgehog of MS-DOS. As you pointed out, the article itself is self-contradictory. My favorite line is about Master of Orion, where the author states, hang on a second, I'm going to pop up. That is covering my email. eBay, Casio tone, 4 new. I got an email from, every time good Casio tone, like vintage Casio keyboards go on sale on eBay, every once in a while I get that email to my old account. Where was I? One of my favorite, Master of Orion. I'd probably be lynched if I didn't mention in a list of MS-DOS games. Despite its popularity, though, it's barely mentioned today. Really? Also, does Albion have the best opening? This is my favorite line in your email, by the way. Has the author ever played XCOM? The XCOM opening, of course. Of course. That opening is so good. It's like the awesomest 1990s Saturday morning cartoon, but like truly violent. Yeah, you know, it's dumb, but I just really got a kick out of hearing somebody from back in the day talk about those old games. So yeah, I agree. Not overrated. Master of Orion, not at all overrated. However, I would be interested to hear if we were to do a deep dive into articles and magazines from that era. Games that were considered underrated has probably changed quite a bit between then and now. Like, Master of Orion is a cult classic game. People who remember games from that era, at least who like strategy games, tip their hat pretty hard to it. But was it considered super popular back in the day? I have no way of knowing because of my age. But I do remember, you know how, gosh, I wish I could remember where I read this. It was an old magazine, video game magazine. I was looking at scans. It might have even been European, because I know that Carl, Scenic 7 PR, used to work with a scan site that would legally scan and release old European video game magazines. But I remember reading, like, in one of those, there's an ad that was like, buy our computer games. Here's a list of some of the computer games you can get. And it was a text list of a few games that we recognized that were new at the time, and one of them was Master of Orion, and it was like $75 or $80. Master of Orion originally, if I'm right, now correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm talking about when it was first released, was an expensive software package. At least that's the impression I get, if I remember correctly. That said, it might not have been, it may, in that context alone, and I realize I'm really reaching hard to defend this guy, but in that context alone, it may have been considered an underrated classic. Think about the Nintendo, right? There are games on the Nintendo that at the time were underrated, and now everybody loves. Or at least everybody knows. Everybody knows about Star Tropics now. They didn't then. I don't know. That's just food for thought. I'd be interested to hear your take on how things have changed in terms of what's underrated and what's not. I think you should have just called it, like 50 games I enjoy on DOS. Because I would love to read that article. Here's 50 games that I enjoy. No holds barred, just games I enjoy, and a paragraph about each one. Let's do it. Let's write that article, man. Despite my negative thoughts on the article itself, it made a great segment for the show. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. So with that said, here's 5 DOS games. What are 5 DOS games that you would mention? Feel free to choose your own categories, such as best DOS games, worst, underrated, hidden gems, or whatever clickbaity title you fancy. I'm going with Desert Island DOS games. You do Desert Island a lot. That's really interesting. And here's the Gamesy List. Number 5, Arcade Volleyball. Excellent choice. Number 4, Jetpack. Number 3, Master of Magic. Number 2, Sid Meier's Colonization. Honorable mentions, Pinball Construction Set and Daggerfall. And number 1 is Master of Orion 2. These are really good picks. I find it interesting that you put Arcade Volleyball in there because it's such... it's a fun game, but it's such a goofy, roots, simple game that if I find it funny to be posted on a list right up there with Master of Orion 2, right up there with Sid Meier's Colonization. These are like big time, super in-depth games. You know what I mean? Sid Meier's Colonization is a game that was made by brilliant people. Brilliant people. Arcade Volleyball was not that game. It's not a bad game. But years ago, hanging around on Skype with Sean, I remember joking that Arcade Volleyball, with those little goofy heads, for those of you who've never played Arcade Volleyball, it's early MS-DOS. It's in 3 colors, the bright pink, bright cyan, and black, and that's really it, and white. And there's a big line in the middle to represent the net, and it's like a side view kind of volleyball game, but the 2 players are these big melon head sort of things with a head and feet, and you jump and bang the ball with your head. Fun little game, but it's designed that back in the early IBM days, you could play it with 2 people on a single keyboard because it only took like 2 or 3 keys to play. So you could bind one set to like the arrow keys or the number keys, which were on the right side of the keyboard at that time, and then the left side could be like Q and W and 2 or something. Good games. I'm pushing 52 minutes, and I don't know if I could... Typically, when you ask me that kind of question, I stop the program and I like write down a few things and then return. I can't do that now because I have to make sure that the show actually comes out. But just to name a few, the reason I think the desert island thing is so interesting is because I've actually been in the desert island situation, and this occurred to me a couple days ago when I was like first reading your email. All right, so I moved out of my house when I was 17 years old. And I didn't have a lot of money. I moved into my older brother's basement, and I just dropped out of high school, and I had I got my first job. I was working at a chicken place. I didn't know it at the time, but I had pretty severe ADD that was untreated, and I was getting into a lot of trouble. And my drug of choice was apathy. This is something I commonly say to people now, which turns out to be extremely damaging as well. Didn't do any like real drugs, but I was drenched. I was bathed in apathy. Give me a second here. Something just came up. Okay, so I moved out of my mom's house at 17. I was in my brother's house in his basement. I was working, and I was starting my adult life at 17. Now, I didn't have a computer at that point that was very powerful, because I had to leave most of my belongings behind. Most of my belongings. But I did have a little laptop that I bought off of eBay at the time that had... It had a modem on it, but I didn't really have access to the internet. I had an old copy of AOL, and I was able to use that to connect to my brother's account when he wasn't using it. So I was able to do a few things on an early version of AOL, but that's about it. And it was running Windows 95, which meant I had access to native DOS, because in Windows 95 it was still basically a DOS shell. It didn't stop being DOS based until 98. And I couldn't get games off of the internet. Right? I was able to get a few really small things off of like the AOL file share system. Like I got a hold of the Zork games, but I was in that situation where I had a little, very small handful of games. This computer didn't have a CD drive because it was too old for that, but it did have a floppy drive. So I would get games when I would go to somebody's house. When I was lucky enough, hey, do you have any floppy disk games? Do you have any floppy disks? Can I copy a couple of DOS games and bring them home with me? There were like one or two instances where I actually was able to bring my laptop and hook it up and get a couple games installed. So when you talk about the Desert Island games, here are some of the actual Desert Island games I had living in my brother's basement, 17 years old, with my first full-time job, earning money for myself. I had SimCity 2000, which I didn't have the patience to play. I had the shareware version of Doom. I had a game called Mac Blaster, which was it was not a DOS game. It was a Windows game that doesn't work on any version other than Windows 95. I spent years trying to find it, and I did eventually find it at one point, and it just didn't work. Kind of broke my heart a little bit. It was like a cheesy Space Invaders clone, but you played as an MS-DOS computer, and you were trying to shoot Macintosh computers, and the bullets were like half-eaten apples. Really weird game. Not like a professional game. This is like something somebody would make and distribute on a bulletin board system or something like that. But I played a lot of Mac Blaster. And I had Jetpack. Jetpack was one of the games that I had. I had an NES emulator with no sound on this computer, by the way. There was no sound card. I had an NES emulator with like 3 games on it, and one of them was Super Mario Bros. 3. It's the only game in that, only Nintendo ROM I remember playing on that computer. And couple other games that didn't get played much, but like I seem to remember having like an early version of SimCity, like the original SimCity for Windows or DOS, but I'm not sure if that's true. I might be remembering that wrong. But mostly I remember Mac Blaster, SimCity 2000, and Super Mario Bros. 3. Yeah, so I know that doesn't really answer your question, but yeah, those were my picks at the time, because that's what I could get my hands on. Thinking back, I must have also had like an old Apogee side-scroller. Like I think there was also a handful of games that I had that I just wasn't considering playing. Like now when you have a Steam library, or even like a big, group of Nintendo games, there's usually a certain number of games that you just kind of gloss over and never play. Right? It's the backlog. The backlog's always been a part of game collecting. Pretty sure even in those circumstances, I had some kind of backlog, like Commander Keen, and and I was just like, you know what? I'm 17 now. I played a ton of Commander Keen when I was like 11. I'm done with it. Good times. I remember the day I installed the Doom shareware version and SimCity 2000. I felt so lucky because I was at my buddy Rob's house, and Robert had kind of a similar situation to me. He had like a group of his either his dad's old floppy disks or floppy disks that he had or something. I don't know. And he had SimCity 2000 on floppy disk. It was 2 floppy disks, and I was like, I'm so lucky. I'm the luckiest guy in the world. I get to install SimCity 2000. Let's do this. Then I got home and I realized, oh yeah, I don't have the patience or brains for this game. Not until later in life. So I don't know. I guess that makes SimCity 2000 one of my Desert Island games. Let's read on. Yes, I like Master of Orion's like I like my Civilizations. That is, I prefer to play the second game in the series. I've actually never played the original Master of Orion, nor the original Civilization. In any case, I've been playing quite a bit of Master of Orion 2 this past week. I beat the game on medium, so I'm pretty close to beating it on hard with my current game. Really, really enjoy it. CF, you owe it to yourself to check this one out. I'm sure you owe it 3 ways to Sunday. Own it 3 ways to Sunday, but if you don't, it's on sale right now on GOG. I do own Master of Orion 2. Played it once. Didn't hate it, but I was at the peak with interest in the original Master of Orion. Never got into it. And you know, I do owe it to myself to try that game. You owe it to yourself to try the first game, I would say. Hang on 1 second. Somebody's trying to contact me. There we go. Yeah, man. I got to catch up on my... How do I put this into words? I've got to catch up on my Hemrock gaming. Do you know what I mean? We got to, like... I know we're waiting on me to do my turn in Alpha Centauri. You got this really awesome Civ 2 mod that you made that just isn't getting the love that it deserves. You got levels in Jetpack that you've made, which is an awesome game. We gotta have a night where it's like where we'll just like sit at our computers and just like find some way to like run like a jukebox and just stream chiptunes. And then just play some of these games at the same time while hanging out on Skype. There used to be a web service. I'm sure we could find something like it where you could upload an MP3 and it would just play it for everybody in the room. I'm sure that kind of thing is super easy now. We can do some chiptune jukebox action. You know, play some Civ, play some Jetpack, play some Cockatrice. Yeah, let's do it. Reading on. While you were talking about the MS-DOS games, you mentioned the term retro revival. In your opinion, when did the retro revival begin? I remember having this discussion with Jerry Terrifying about a decade ago. Do you think the retro revival has ended, or is it ending soon? I think our vision of retro revival is incredibly skewed. I think it's going to depend on the age of the person you're talking about. Me, personally, I experienced it probably like... I don't remember the year, but I distinctly remember it was when I was searching on GameFAQs.com and people were talking about and getting excited about the new Angry Nintendo Nerd video. That was when the retro revival began for me. Because remember, Angry Nintendo Nerd, Angry Video Game Nerd, good old James Rolfe, he was not into that. He was not into games. There was a one-off video that he made that wasn't even good, where he was talking about, the very first video where he was talking about, what was it, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and it snowballed. Wasn't because he loved these old games. It was because everybody around him saw what he had done. It was like, oh yeah, you've got something there. And that was the beginning of the retro revival, in my opinion. I was already collecting NES games at the time, and of course there were people like me who were already into it at the time. But that was when the snowball started rolling. That was when guys like us were just starting to hit that age where we would look back to those days and get nostalgic for that time. So that's why I think of a retro revival as a specific event that happened, that started. I don't think it will ever end just because it's the thing of people that age are now nostalgic. I don't think that's ever necessarily going to go away. You could argue that there always was a retro revival, and even before that, people were just retro revival about things that were even older. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. It's a very interesting question because you're going to get a lot of different answers depending on who you talk to. Let's read on because I can hear people stirring in the hallway, so I'm going to have to take a break from recording here in a minute. Interesting / sad story about Battle Chess and your dad. May he rest in peace. My dad, too, was an old MS... My dad, too, had an old MS-DOS machine. For a minute there, I was about to say my dad was an MS-DOS machine. Wouldn't that be weird? He must have picked it up in the late 80s and early 90s. I never remember having not having a computer in the house growing up. He also had a chess game, but it wasn't Battle Chess. I think it was one of the Chessmaster games. Pause. Actually, I did a quick YouTube search, and I'm pretty certain it was Chessmaster 2000. I had it too. I distinctly remember it having a boss button. When you pressed it, the screen immediately switched to some sort of primitive spreadsheet type display to make it look like you were working in case the boss walked by your workstation. Haha, pretty clever. I know I've mentioned this before, but it would be a cool video if you were to pit two different chess games against one another, such as Chessmaster for Game Boy and Battle Chess for MS-DOS. Yes, that is an amazing idea. I'm glad you brought that up because I was fired up about that idea a couple years back, and it just got pushed by the wayside. I think I would need some help to do that, but my son's getting older. Maybe I could, give him some sort of incentive to help me get that video made, because I would love to do that. Oh my gosh. Boss buttons were also a thing back in the DOS game. A good number of games had boss buttons. Gotta bring the boss button back. You asked about our Alpha Centauri game. It started June 29th, 2018. 1920. So it's like 2.5 years old, I guess. Yikes. So I was watching Low Fat Jello, Derek Alexander, Happy Video Game Nerd, Stop Skeletons from Fighting recently, and I noticed at the end of his YouTube video when displaying the names of patrons, one of them had a very interesting title. I thought it was pretty funny and it reminded me of you. I've attached a screenshot so you can witness it for yourself. Take care, my friend. I'm rooting for you. Keep rolling retro. Hemrock. Thanks, brother. It's good to hear from you, man. Now we got some attachments. First thing is his... Oh my gosh. Derek Alexander always had a baby face, in my opinion. And I think just in the last couple of years, that baby face is starting to go away. Which is something that happens to people when you get older. It's just that, in his case, man, when you got a baby face and it finally goes, it looks like you get a lot older in a very short amount of time. And I think just the silly face he's making in this particular screenshot makes him look a lot older than he actually is. So this particular person in his sponsors, man, this guy's got a lot of sponsors. Permillo, put Cyberpunk 2077 on Ouya, you cowards. Yeah, do it. It would have to be a 2D version, but do it. That's pretty funny. I do miss the Ouya. It was such a promising time. It was garbage hardware, but it was proof that even on garbage hardware, if you had grassroots developers and a great community, then you could really do something special. Could you imagine if the Ouya was like solid hardware? Even let's say the processor was the same and all that stuff was the same, but the controller was better and there was no latency issues. The Ouya. Hemrock, man. Talk about an email that takes me back. Now, he also attached, I don't think he mentioned this in the text of his email, but he attached a very common infographic, a list of worthwhile DOS games. And it's like a 10 by 15 grid of diskettes, drawn pictures of discs, and each disc has a year on it and a game title and a screenshot. For example, I'm zooming into the middle and we can see 1997 Grand Theft Auto, the original Grand Theft Auto. I forgot that was a DOS game. And then there's a blurb on it that I can't read because the way my computer scales the image down. Heroes of Might and Magic, 1995. Leisure Suit Larry and the Land of the Lounge Lizards, 1987. Panzer General, 1994. I enjoy Panzer General. A lot of really good games on this list. If you've never seen this is an old image that gets circulated a lot, but if you've never seen it, it's worth looking at and blowing up. Last week when we read that article, and that was kind of the show for the week, this is absolutely a show. Blowing this up and just reading it and taking a look at each one of the games. Because there's a lot of games on here that, like, you'll know. Like Civilization is on here, 1991. But there's a lot of games you might not know unless you're like a big DOS guy. Budokan, The Martial Spirit. Abuse, which we saw a good video for on Darabaku's channel from years ago. Death Rally is on here, which is a great DOS game. Oh my gosh. Yeah, we're going to do this as an episode. Might not be next week just because I know I'm going to forget, but there's a lot of really good content in that one little image. Hemrock, brother, thanks so much for the email. That's probably the coolest email that I've read in a very long time. Thank you for your patience and letting me put out an episode a day late while I'm struggling to keep up with the holidays, and just basically trying to simultaneously keep my life in order and keep my head on my shoulders. I appreciate it. All right. I need to get some water. All right. So I've got the... Are we crackling? We're crackling a little bit. Hang on. It's going to pop. Sorry about that. It's worth it, though. Sounds better now. All right. Comments over on YouTube. We've got... mostly on some of the random videos that I put up. I scheduled out a bunch of videos over the last week, including a couple that I just had sitting on my hard drive for a long time. So I'm not going to go through every single unrelated video comment, but we got one from Desm. Okay, I'm trying to find the mark where I should start reading. Yeah, here we go. Swingle writes, wait, no, that's on Bloodbath. He's talking about how to be successful in playing Sword Lord, which is a great game. Tezra has a slow momentum wind-up, meaning you'll do poorly when frequently switching left to right. She moves faster, enabling quick swings when utilizing a quarter-turn swing. You weren't doing badly because of the controls. You didn't get a hang of the system just yet. One correction, the characters don't affect weapon range. They change movement, health, and how fast weapons turn. Like the brown character is better with heavy weapons, etc., while Maydai does better with a sword. Okay, yeah, so I definitely have to try a few more people and change up my technique a little bit, but good game. We've got Sendu writes, when you could still rent games. Hey, we still have a family video here in Ohio. How about that? I haven't rented a video or a game, and apart from when we referred to Steam as the rental service, but I haven't gone into a store and rented a game in a long time. Desm101 writes, I remember my friend who had a PC before our family did showed me battle chess. I was really impressed, and it made me want to learn to play chess. Our family didn't get a PC until the late 90s, and we all shared it for school and stuff. My uncle in Arizona had a really nice PC setup in the early 90s. He introduced me to games like Chuck Yeager's Air Combat, Comanche, and Descent. He had a nice flight stick and a sound blaster and hooked it up to a big stereo system. Those were the days. That sounds really cool, man. That was not easy to do back then. And that's it for comments on the podcast. The rest of the stuff was directed towards a video that I put out last week of Toe Ball number 1, which was a Let's Play that I recorded, a short Let's Play I recorded like a long time ago. And it was sitting in my folder, and I opened it up, and I was like, hey, I wonder why I never posted this. So I posted it up, and then as it turns out, there was a block like halfway through it where that's like just static in the audio. So I got razzed a little bit for that. But apart from that, it's good times. All right, boys and girls. There was a lot of stuff I wanted to go over, but I want to make sure this gets out. I think over the last week, in terms of gaming, I rediscovered RPG Maker, which was a big explosion for me. On a lark, I wanted to try my oldest version of RPG Maker, which is RPG Maker XP. If I had to give you a date it came out, Steam has it marked as 2013, so pretty old, but I feel like it's older than that. Not sure. Yeah, and I got hooked. I messed with that quite a bit, actually, over the last couple of days, which I think might be part of the reason why we're a day late. I just got into... This is my first real instance of going back to RPG Maker since I became like an IT professional. And so I'm approaching it, with some programming experience under my belt. I was able to, do some cool stuff. So I have a little game going with some, basic maps and basic characters. But now I have a day of the week system where it's like certain things happen on certain days. It's like the pub is always like a favorite place to work on in RPG Maker. So the pub is now closed on Sundays. And like certain people who give you certain quests only appear on certain days of the week. And the next thing I'm working on is a quest board where certain quests will show up every day. And the idea is that they're going to be randomly generated using RNG. And we're not talking about story quests. We're talking about little side quests. Please go get X amount of Y items. where X and Y are pulled off of a table, and so they're different every time. You know, go get rid of X and Y dangerous animals in the area, and where those are picked off of a table, and so they're different every time, and that sort of thing. Yeah, so that should be fun. So even though it's an old rudimentary RPG Maker looking game, just toying with the ability to, I don't know, add things to do, which has been a great time. I even got a couple of programs on my phone for basic spriting, which is something I've never really got into, is actually drawing sprites. Because, hang on a second, what do we got here? There we go. Yeah, we're in good shape. So the quest board thing and doing a little spriting has been... it's been a learning experience. I'm not very good at it, but it's fun to try. In RPG Maker, I've been messing with using RNG to affect it in certain ways. So I wanted to make like a pachinko machine that you could go to, and when you would press the space bar, you would put a ball in, and then a couple of random dice would roll, or whatever, which would determine the outcome of the ball drop. And even though I couldn't like program an actual pachinko machine, with pins and stuff where you could play, and see the balls drop and all that stuff, I could just make a little machine, and you would have a ball count, and the ball count would reduce or raise depending on the results of numbers, which in and of itself wouldn't be very fun. But you could tie that into like a mini quest where it's like, please, I need you to go do XYZ at the pachinko parlor, and the pachinko parlor would have actual machines that you could play a little mini game. So that's one thing I'm messing with, and I didn't see that coming. I just opened up RPG Maker one day, and the first several screens that I made were like one frame screens that are like primitively drawn, and I just started doing my little tech test game, and there you go. And now it's turning out to be a real game. So I don't know. It's kind of nice. RPG Maker, and there was one other thing that I really got into. Minecraft. I got back into Minecraft. Not much I can really say about that, though. I never actually beat Minecraft because they rolled out the Ender Dragon and all that stuff. All that came out after I stopped playing, so I never really actually completed the game. So I started playing through Minecraft again, and that's been a good time too. Stayed up pretty late last night, actually, working on my Minecraft save. Just been fun. They did a lot with the Nether, The Nether, back when I used to play, was just like a big barren empty space with lava, and that's pretty much it. And now there's like, stuff you can check out, which is pretty cool. I'm trying to go through it legit, although I did install a couple of mods for my kids. I got the minimap mod, because my kids love that one. Whenever I do mods, I get the minimap mod. Being able to set a waypoint for your home makes it a lot easier. And the minimap mod really breaks the game in a big way, because you can see stuff around you when you're mining, and when you set a waypoint, you can actually teleport to that waypoint. So in my playthrough, I'm not using it. Like, I turn everything off, but it's installed for the kids. And I also installed a quick home mod, which basically just gives you two commands that are commonly used on multiplayer servers. Set home and home. So if you go in your house and you do /set home, then that marks that as your home. And then when you wander out into the woods, you can type home and it'll teleport you back home. So if you're using the waypoints mod, you don't need that, because you can just set a waypoint, teleport to the waypoint. But the manipulation of the waypoints is a little on the cumbersome side, and this is just a quick one-word command. So I dropped that in there anyway. So as soon as I actually make it to the boss and beat him, then I'll start utilizing those commands in a big way. But I spent time yesterday modding it and getting those hooked up. They made modding Minecraft easier than it used to be, but not by much. Modding Minecraft used to be really, really messy. Now it's just a little messy. You have to go through making sure you have the right Java installed, and then making sure you have Forge installed, and then making sure that your mods are compatible with the version of the game that you're using. All things you used to have to do, except at least now there's some installer base. Like, you don't have to hex any files like you used to, which is pretty cool. Yeah, so that's Minecraft and RPG Maker. Two games that I can't imagine anybody would be super interested in hearing me talk about. But there you go. And that's the show for the week. It's New Year's Eve. So we're saying goodbye to 2020 today. So whatever you're doing, I hope it's going well. And I hope you have a good New Year's Eve. Take care, and I'll see you next week.